Jesus, can you even afford that? Or are you just here for the free air conditioning? The words sliced through the low hum of the lunchtime crowd like a whip. Every head at the polished oak counter turned toward the source. A young waitress with a white apron tied too tight around her narrow waist, her smirk glinting sharper than the cutlery she carried. But what she didn't know, what no one there knew yet, was that those words would be the worst mistake of her life. The place was Marlowe's Kitchen, a midtown cafe that liked to pretend it was something more than it was. Edison bulbs, reclaimed wood tables, lo-fi jazz whispering from ceiling speakers. A thin drizzle streaked the front windows, blurring the city into watercolor gray. Inside, the air smelt of butter and burnt espresso. The Friday lunch rush was thinning out, but the tension that now rippled through the room felt alive, electric, mean. The target of her mockery sat alone in a corner booth. He was a tall man, maybe late 40s, dark-skinned, dressed in an old denim jacket that had seen better decades. His posture was gentle, patient, like he'd been waiting his whole life for the world to calm down enough to listen. In front of him, a small plate of fries, a black coffee. That was all. The waitress, name-tag reading Chloe, leaned against the counter laughing under her breath. "I mean, come on," she muttered to her coworker loud enough for him and everyone else to hear. "He's been sitting there an hour over $3 fries. You'd think he's saving up for dessert." Her coworker, a younger busboy who didn't want trouble, kept wiping glasses in silence. The man in the booth didn't respond at first. He just stirred his coffee slowly, eyes steady on the swirling surface. The silence he held wasn't weakness. It was the kind that unnerved people, the kind that said he'd learned long ago the cost of talking back. But Chloe wasn't finished. She turned, tray in hand, and walked toward him with that brand of confidence that only comes from people who've never been told no. Her heels clacked against the tiles like punctuation marks. "So," she said brightly, resting the tray on her hip, "you planning to order anything else, or should I start renting out the table?" She gave a laugh, light and fake. "We kind of run a business here."
The man looked up at her, finally. His eyes were deep and calm, but there was something behind them, something that made her smile falter for half a second. "I'll be done soon," he said, voice low, even. "Take your time," she replied, but the sarcasm dripped heavy. "We'd just like to, make room for paying customers." Someone in the next booth chuckled awkwardly. Another diner, a woman in a suit, shifted uncomfortably, eyes darting between them. The jazz kept playing, but quieter now, as if the speakers themselves were listening. The man nodded once, took a sip of his coffee, and set it down with deliberate care. "Thank you," he said simply. And that should have been the end of it. But Chloe didn't like how calm he was. She wanted a reaction, something to prove her superiority. "You know," she continued, voice dropping to that conspiratorial tone people use when they think they're being witty, "next time you might want to check the prices before sitting down. This isn't like McDonald's." The busboy's hand froze mid-polish. "Chloe," he murmured, barely audible. She ignored him. The man's lips curved, not into a smile exactly, but something close. "You're right," he said. "It's not." He pulled out a small notebook and scribbled something inside, then tucked it away. "Thank you for reminding me." Chloe rolled her eyes and walked off. "Unbelievable," she muttered, tossing a glance over her shoulder. "Guy acts like he's taking notes for Yelp." At the counter, two regulars whispered. "Poor guy," one said. "She's really out of line." "Yeah, but what's he gonna do? Complain to management? She's the manager today." The man remained seated for another minute, quiet, composed. Then he stood, slid a few bills under his plate, more than enough to cover the meal, and adjusted his jacket. He walked past the counter without another word. "Leaving so soon?" Chloe called after him, still half laughing, half daring him to look back. He paused at the door, turned his head just enough that his eyes caught hers. "Sooner than you think," he said softly, and then stepped out into the rain. The bell above the door chimed once, twice, then fell silent. Outside, the drizzle turned to a steady pour, drumming against the glass. Inside, the laughter died down, replaced by that uneasy quiet that lingers after cruelty. "Wow," Chloe said to the busboy. "Sensitive much?" He didn't answer. He was staring at the window, watching the man walk away. Not fast, not angry, just purposeful, like he had somewhere important to be, somewhere she'd regret not knowing. Rain turned heavier as Chloe strutted behind the counter, victory bright on her face. "Table 7 finally left," she announced, twirling a pen. "Took 'em an hour to nurse 3 fries. You'd think we were a shelter." A couple of barstool regulars tried to laugh. It fizzled. Marco, the busboy, stacked plates. "You didn't have to do that," he said. "He wasn't bothering anyone." "He was bothering turnover." Chloe popped her gum. "We've got quotas and standards." She glanced at the wet window. "If you can't buy a meal, you don't get a table." The woman in the gray suit edged to her booth's lip, then checked her phone. A teenager near the pane filmed, camera low. Lo-fi jazz ticked on. Chloe snapped a check presenter shut. "I'll comp the coffee. Mercy is good branding." She said it for the room. "Put that on the chalkboard. We're charitable, within reason." "Within reason," Marco echoed. He slid the fries plate into the bus bin. From the pass, a cook called, "Everything okay out there?" "Peachy," Chloe sang, "except for the freeloaders." The door chimed. A middle-aged couple shook umbrellas. "2 for lunch?" Chloe's smile flashed teeth, but not warmth. Classy thudded into the room anyway. The teen's screen filled with comments. At the POS, Chloe tapped items. "If management backed me with policies," she told Marco, "we wouldn't attract situations." A sign. "Minimum order applies." Think corporate would approve? Or are we still pretending everyone's welcome until they embarrass us? "Pretty sure everyone's welcome is the point," Marco said. "Not on my shift." She checked her reflection in the espresso machine. People like that think decency is something you owe them for existing. The kitchen printer clattered. The mood stayed tilted. The couple by the window ordered with careful politeness. When Chloe left, the woman whispered, "That was cruel." "Uniforms make some folks taller," her partner said. The suit woman came to the counter. "May I speak to whoever's in charge today?" "That would be me," Chloe said. "Chloe, floor lead." "Then here's feedback." The woman folded her receipt. "The way you spoke to that man was unacceptable. He paid, he sat. That's allowed." "We appreciate your input," Chloe replied, bright and brittle. "It's not input," the woman said. "It's decency." Silence spread across the tables. "If you're unhappy," Chloe said, "you're free to dine elsewhere." The woman returned to her booth, jaw tight. The teen tilted his phone toward the chalkboard. Marlowe's kitchen slid into timelines. At 1:17 p.m., the door opened again. A delivery driver rolled in a dolly stacked with boxes stamped with the cafe's logo. "Finally, the menus," Chloe said. "Corporate issue," the driver replied. "Need a signature." "Corporate?" Chloe signed and slid open the top box. Glossy menus slid like cards. Inside, a page glowed. Community commitments, hospitality, accessibility, respect. A paragraph promised no minimum order ever. "Huh," Marco said. "Aspirational copy." Chloe fanned them across the host stand. Then, chest lifted. "Welcome to Marlowe's, where we serve anyone with sense enough to pay." Online, viewers doubled. The door chimed again. A man entered, rain beads on a denim jacket, the same quiet presence, now carrying intention. He read the chalkboard, then the menu. Chloe brightened as if seeing an old joke. "Back so soon? Sugar over steel. Decided you can afford dessert after all?" He looked at Marco first, a nod that made the busboy stand taller, then at the teenager with the phone, then at Chloe. "I came to ask for a receipt," he said, "and a name." "For the receipt?" "For you." He tapped the badge on her apron. "But don't worry, I can spell Chloe." His eyes touched the menu again, "And I wanted to see the new page." "Page?" she asked. He opened a menu in red. "No minimum order, ever. Hospitality is not conditional." "I like that sentence."
It's market fluff, she said. We're a business, not a lounge. Businesses run on choices, he said. Words are choices too. The room tightened, gaze by gaze. The cook peered through the pass. The suit woman folded her hands. Cloge reached for the menu as if to close it on his fingers. He let it go, and she missed. She smiled harder. If you're looking to file a complaint, email is on the website. I know, he said. I wrote it. He let the line hang, then shrugged. But I'm not here to complain. What are you here for? He looked at the rain silvering the window and the dolly of menus. To finish my lunch, he said, and to see how you treat me when I order more than fries. Chloe's jaw flexed. Then order. Gladly, he said. Let's see if the kitchen's as good as the copy.
The man settled back into the booth, raindrops still glittering on his jacket like shards of patience. Chloe hovered nearby, arms crossed, mouth drawn tight. Every line of her posture said defiance. Every twitch of his hand said control. He opened the menu, scanning the laminated pages slowly, methodically, as though committing each line to memory. The roast chicken, he murmured, mashed potatoes, and a slice of lemon pie, if you have it fresh. Chloe scribbled the order like she was doing him a favor. You're sure you can handle all that? It's not on the budget bites list. He gave her a small, polite nod. I'm sure. Then he added, with the faintest ghost of humor, and a glass of water, no ice. When she walked off, Marco leaned on the counter. You're going to get written up if he complains. Chloe barked a laugh. Please, people like him don't complain. They disappear. But in the corner, the man didn't disappear. He looked out the rain-drenched window, where traffic lights flickered red and green across puddles, and something far away tightened in his chest. The hum of the restaurant blurred, replaced by an echo of another time. Years ago, not that far, but far enough to scar, he'd stood in a kitchen that smelled of yeast and soap and promise. He'd been younger then, full of restless ideas and a stubborn belief that good food could bridge any distance between people. Back then, he'd worn the same jacket, before it had faded to denim ghosts. The first restaurant he'd ever owned wasn't much more than a converted diner, with second-hand stools and a stove that wheezed when it boiled water. He'd called it Marlowe's Table, after his grandmother, who taught him that feeding people is the most honest kind of prayer. He'd built that place from nothing, brick, bone, and borrowed time. The investors hadn't looked like him, hadn't believed like him, but he'd outworked every one of them. When customers left notes saying, "Best meal I've had in months," he'd tuck them in a box by the register. Gratitude was his currency. But when the brand grew, when Marlowe's Kitchen became a chain, when the lawyers and shareholders started adding their polished signatures to his menus, he'd stepped back, quietly. Let them think he was just another name on paper. They'd called him Founder Emeritus, which, he knew, meant forgettable. And so today, when he'd stepped into this branch of the chain that bore his name and saw the careless pride behind that waitress's smile, he hadn't come as an owner. He'd come as a customer, as a man who wanted to see if the heart he'd poured into it had survived the branding. He already knew the answer. The chicken arrived 15 minutes later, steaming, golden, perfect on the surface, but dry inside. The lemon pie sagged at the crust, too much sugar in the cream. The man ate slowly, as if tasting not food, but memory. Marco brought the water without being asked. "You okay, sir?" The man smiled faintly. "You remind me of myself once." "Sir?" "When I was starting out, always watching, always listening to the wrong people first." Marco hesitated,
then whispered, "I'm sorry about her. She's not usually that—" "She's exactly like this," he interrupted gently. "And that's the problem." Chloe sauntered over. "Everything fine, sir?" she said with forced cheer. He looked up at her, studying her face, the impatience, the certainty that nothing she said could ever come back to her. "Yes," he said finally. "Everything's fine, but you'll want to bring the check." "Oh, already?" She arched an eyebrow. "Guess it wasn't that good after all." He reached into his jacket and placed a card on the table. It gleamed black, matte, embossed with silver letters. She blinked at it, the logo of Marlowe's Group Holdings catching the light. "Corporate card," he said. "Charge it there." Chloe's brow furrowed. "Wait, you work for them?" He tilted his head, a half-smile breaking through. "Something like that." She turned away, unsettled for the first time. Marco watched as she fumbled the checkbook, her hands just slightly trembling. When she brought back the receipt, he signed without looking, leaving the tip line blank. Then he added a note beneath his signature, neat and measured. "Hospitality starts where judgment ends." She stared at the line, heat rising in her cheeks. "What's that supposed to mean?" He stood. "You'll find out soon enough." The bell over the door chimed again as he stepped into the storm. Behind him, Chloe stared at the signature, the name written in calm, elegant strokes. David L. Marlowe. Marco's mouth fell open. "Wait, like the Marlowe? As in the—" "Shut up," she hissed, but her voice trembled. She looked back through the rain-blurred glass, trying to see where he'd gone, but he'd already vanished into the crowd. The phone behind the counter buzzed, an incoming call, the number tagged Head Office. Chloe froze. Marco's wide eyes met hers. And somewhere beneath the low jazz and the hiss of frying oil, the quiet realization began to crawl up her spine. Something had shifted. Something was coming.
By 3 o'clock, the storm outside had become a gray curtain. Rain hammered the windows like an accusation. Inside Marlowe's kitchen, the tables had emptied, leaving the restaurant echoing with that uneasy silence that always follows a public mistake. The jazz had stopped. Even the fryer hissed less. Chloe stood at the counter, hands gripping the edge until her knuckles whitened. She stared at the phone as if it might bite. Marco hovered nearby, drying glasses he'd already polished twice. "You gonna answer that?" She swallowed hard. "No. Maybe it's just inventory." "Inventory doesn't call from head office," Marco said. The phone buzzed again, more insistent. Chloe snatched it up, voice tight. "Marlowe's Kitchen, Midtown. This is Chloe, floor lead." There was a pause, then a calm, authoritative voice. "Miss Carson." Her last name, not Chloe. That made her spine stiffen. "Yes?" "This is Thomas from the executive office. We've received a report concerning a customer incident earlier today." She forced a laugh. "Report? Must be a misunderstanding. Just a customer dispute." The report came from Mr. David Marlowe himself. Every muscle in her face froze. Marco turned at the sound of the name, nearly dropping a glass. The voice continued, smooth but cold. "He was dining in your location for a brand inspection. Your conduct has been documented. We'll need you to remain on site until we can arrange a conversation." "Wait." Her throat went dry. "He was that Marlowe? The founder?" "Yes, ma'am." The line clicked. The air in the restaurant seemed to drop 10 degrees. Chloe's stomach twisted. He didn't say he was... He didn't have to, Marco said quietly. Chloe shot him a glare sharp enough to cut glass. Don't start. You'd think I could have known? He looked like some... She stopped herself, biting down the word. Marco raised a brow. Like what? Never mind. She turned away, pulse racing. People pretend all the time. How was I supposed to know who he was? Maybe that's the point, Marco said softly. Chloe slammed the cash drawer shut. Don't lecture me, Marco. You're a busboy. I run the floor. Not for long, he muttered under his breath. What was that? Nothing. But the whisper hung there, between them, heavier than the rain. By 4 o'clock, word had spread. The teenager's video had hit the internet. Waitress mocks man for ordering fries, doesn't realize he's the owner. The clip was grainy but clear enough. Her smirk, her voice, the laughter. It had already racked up 20,000 views. When the notification popped up on Marco's phone, he didn't even mean to open it, but he did. He saw the comment section flooding with rage and disbelief. He glanced at Chloe, who was pacing now. You might want to see this. She spun around. What? He held up his phone. Her face, frozen mid-sneer, filled the screen. Oh no. She snatched it from him. Who filmed this? The kid by the window. Her breath came short. Delete it. Tell him to delete it. Bit late for that. She tossed the phone back. Great. Fantastic. I'm ruined over fries. She sank into a booth, head in her hands. People are so dramatic. He didn't even look like he belonged here. Marco stared at her. What does that even mean? Nothing. I just mean... Ugh. She clutched her hair. God, this is insane. I didn't say anything wrong. Didn't you? Marco asked. She shot him a glare. Watch your tone. But he didn't back down this time. I watched you humiliate someone who did nothing to you. You called him a freeloader. You mocked him in front of everyone. Because he wasn't buying anything. He was buying dignity. You charged him more than you'll ever know. For the first time, her eyes faltered. You think I'm a monster? I think you're scared. She blinked, trying to hold composure. Well, wouldn't you be? He's the owner. My career's over. Maybe, Marco said. Or maybe this is your first real lesson. By 5, the call came again. This time it wasn't a voice. It was a man, tall, suited, silver pin on his lapel, stepping through the door with the kind of authority that silences rooms. Miss Carson. Chloe rose automatically. Yes. Sir, I can explain. He held up a hand. Save it for Mr. Marlowe. He's requested a meeting. Tonight. Her throat tightened. Tonight? Here? After close? Marco looked at her with a mix of pity and curiosity. Guess he didn't disappear after all. The corporate rep turned to him. You're Marco? Yes, sir. You'll stay as well. Mr. Marlowe asked for you by name. Marco blinked once. Me? The rep nodded. You too. He left as quietly as he'd entered, leaving the doorbell's echo trembling in the air. They closed early. Chairs flipped onto tables. The rain stopped, but the silence didn't. Chloe sat in the same booth where she'd mocked him hours ago, her reflection wavering in the window. Her lipstick had faded, the confidence was gone. He asked for you, she said finally, voice small. Why? Marco shrugged. Maybe because I said sorry. She stared at him, realization creeping in like dawn. You talked to him after I left the table? He nodded. Yeah, I told him you were under pressure. Her voice cracked. And what'd he say? That pressure shows what's inside a person. The clock ticked past 7. The lights dimmed. Outside, the puddles mirrored the last bits of twilight. The front door opened. David Marlowe stepped in. Same jacket, same calm. Only now, he wasn't a mystery. He was the storm she hadn't seen coming.
The lights buzzed faintly as Marlowe's kitchen settled into after-hours stillness. The air smelled of lemon cleaner and old grease. Every clock tick seemed too loud, every breath too fragile. Chloe stood near the counter, wringing her hands in her apron. Marco leaned against the wall, silent. The only sound came from the slow, steady steps of David Marlowe as he crossed the floor, the same steps that had carried him out hours ago, now heavier with purpose. "Mr. Marlowe," Chloe began quickly, her voice cracking like thin ice. "Sir, I didn't realize who you were. If I had, I never would have—" "That's exactly why I'm here," he said. His tone wasn't angry, but it cut through the room like cold steel. She froze. He walked toward the booth he'd sat in earlier, the one she'd made his stage of humiliation. Without asking, he sat down again. "You see," he continued quietly, "respect that depends on recognition isn't respect at all. It's theater." Chloe's lips parted, but no sound came. Marco stepped forward hesitantly. "Sir, if I can—" Marlowe raised a hand, stopping him. "You can sit, Marco. You've got nothing to apologize for." Marco nodded and slid into a chair. David turned his eyes back to Chloe. "You manage this location?" "Yes, sir. Temporary floor lead." "How long?" 4 months. "Enough time to learn how to treat people?" His words weren't shouted, but each syllable struck like a hammer. "Tell me, what did you see when I came in today?" Chloe hesitated. Her throat worked. I saw a man who'd been sitting too long, just taking up space." "Taking up space," he repeated softly, as if tasting the phrase. "A crime in a restaurant named after my grandmother's kitchen table." Chloe blinked. "Your grandmother?" "She used to feed strangers," he said. "Every Sunday. People who couldn't pay, people who had nowhere else to go. When I opened this business, I swore we'd carry that same spirit. You know what she used to tell me?" Chloe shook her head, almost trembling. He leaned forward, eyes fixed on hers. "She said, 'Hospitality means feeding the hungry, not flattering the wealthy. But you turned it into a stage for cruelty.'" Her eyes glassed. "I didn't mean to." "Yes, you did," he interrupted softly. "That's what makes it worse. It wasn't a mistake. It was instinct." The silence that followed was suffocating. Marco's chest rose slowly, tension in every breath. Then Marlowe stood. His presence seemed to fill the space, quiet but enormous. He looked around the dining room, the empty tables, the flickering sign in the window, the ghost of laughter from earlier. This place, he said, was supposed to be about warmth.
Community. But somewhere along the way, people like you turned it into a mirror for your own insecurities. Chloe's voice shook. "Are you going to fire me?" "I haven't decided yet." She exhaled shakily, almost a sob. "I'll make it right, I swear. I'll apologize publicly, He held up a hand. "No rehearsed apologies. I've seen enough of those. I want honesty." Tears finally broke through her composure. "I thought you were mocking me," she said suddenly, desperate. "You came in, quiet, looking at everything, taking notes. You made me feel small." "You did that to yourself," he said simply. Marco shifted, trying to soften the air. "Mr. Marlowe, she's scared." "She should be," Marlowe replied, not unkindly. "Because fear makes people listen. And maybe, just maybe, change." He paced slowly toward the window, looking out at the wet city beyond the glass. His reflection stared back at him, older now, wearier. "When I started this company, people told me I wouldn't last 6 months. No one wanted a restaurant chain run by someone who looked like me. They said investors wouldn't touch it, customers wouldn't trust it." He turned, voice tightening. "And yet, here we are. 23 locations, hundreds of employees, thousands of meals served every day." Chloe nodded quickly, trying to find a footing. "It's an amazing legacy, sir." "Legacy?" He almost smiled. "Legacy is just what people say when you stop paying attention. I came here today because I wanted to see if this place still felt like mine." He paused. "It doesn't."
Her lip trembled. "Please, sir, if you just give me a chance to prove myself." He studied her for a long moment. Then quietly, "Do you even remember the name of the busboy?" She blinked, thrown off. "What?" "The young man who's been cleaning up after you all day. Do you know his name?" She hesitated. "Marco, I think." "You think?" She looked down. Marlowe turned to Marco. "And yet you remembered hers." Marco shrugged awkwardly. "She yells it at people enough." A single corner of Marlowe's mouth twitched in amusement, but his tone stayed steady. "Kindness is free, Miss Carson. So is cruelty. The cost difference shows up later." Outside, thunder rolled in the distance. The city lights flickered like camera flashes. Marlowe's phone buzzed, a notification. He glanced at it briefly, then slid it back into his pocket. Seems the world already knows about what happened today. Chloe's eyes widened. "It's online?" He nodded. "It's spreading fast. My PR team wants me to issue a statement by morning." She stepped forward, panic rising. "Please, sir, don't mention my name. I'll lose everything." He looked at her with a kind of sad empathy. "You already did, Chloe. You just didn't notice until now." For a moment, no one moved. The hum of the lights, the tick of the clock, the faint hiss of rain outside, they all filled the void where words couldn't. Then Marlowe said, "Tomorrow morning, this restaurant will be closed for retraining. Every staff member, including management, and you, Miss Carson, will report directly to me." Chloe blinked in confusion. "You're not firing me?" "Not yet," he said. "You'll serve under the same man you mocked today, until you understand what service really means." Her breath caught. You're going to make me work for you?" "No," he said quietly, walking to the door. "I'm going to make you work with me. There's a difference." He pushed the door open. Cool night air rushed in, carrying the scent of rain and redemption. "Tomorrow," he said, pausing at the threshold. 8 sharp. Then he was gone. The bell above the door chimed softly, like an ending and a beginning, all at once.
Morning cracked open gray and heavy. The storm had passed, but its scent still clung to the streets. Damp asphalt, rusted rain gutters, coffee brewing somewhere too far away. Marlowe's kitchen stood silent under the pale dawn light, its windows streaked with dried rain like tear tracks. Inside, the smell of bleach and regret lingered. Chloe stood behind the counter at exactly 7:50 a.m., her reflection pale in the glass of the pastry case. She'd worn her best white blouse, ironed twice, but her hands wouldn't stop shaking. Marco was already there, wiping down tables that didn't need cleaning. Neither spoke. The tension was a living thing between them. At 8:03, the door opened. David Marlowe stepped in. Same jacket, same unhurried calm. Behind him followed 2 people, a woman in a dark suit carrying a tablet, and a tall man in rolled-up sleeves with a clipboard. They looked like inspectors, but moved like soldiers on familiar ground. "Good morning," Marlowe said. His voice carried no warmth, but no cruelty either, just authority. "Let's begin." Chloe straightened. "Mr. Marlowe? Sir, before we—" He held up a hand. "You'll speak when I ask you to. Today isn't about saving face, it's about truth." The woman beside him, tablet in hand, gave a curt nod. "My name's Dana, HR Director for the Marlowe Group. We're conducting a behavioral audit based on yesterday's incident." Chloe's stomach twisted. "A behavioral—" "Yes," Dana said coolly. "Every employee will be evaluated, starting with you." Marlowe turned to Marco. "And you'll assist." "Me?" Marco blinked. "You saw everything," Marlowe said, "and unlike some people, you listened before judging. That's the kind of perspective we need." Chloe's cheeks flushed. "Sir,
With respect, he's just a busboy. Marlowe's gaze pinned her like a nail. He's an employee, same as you. Titles don't determine worth here. Conduct does. The clipboard man, who'd been silent till now, cleared his throat. Mr. Marlowe, we're ready for the walkthrough when you are. Marlowe nodded. Let's go. They started moving through the restaurant, the booths, the counter, the kitchen, the back office, like a slow, methodical storm. Every question hit harder than the last. How do you handle customer complaints? Dana asked. With professionalism, Chloe stammered. And yesterday? Chloe hesitated. That was different. He wasn't careful, Marlowe interrupted quietly. Finish that sentence. She swallowed. He wasn't acting like a normal guest. Dana's eyes flicked up. Define normal. Chloe's throat tightened. I just mean, he didn't order much. He stayed a long time. Marlowe folded his arms. So time and money define a guest's value to you? No, that's not what I... He turned to Marco. How long have you worked here? 5 months, sir. And how are you treated? Marco hesitated, glancing at Chloe. Depends on who's watching. Chloe looked away. Dana scribbled something on her tablet. The scratching sound felt like thunder. At 9:12, the front door opened again. A woman entered, middle-aged, her uniform plain, her presence commanding. She carried a large box of fresh herbs.
Delivery for Mr. Marlowe, she said, setting it on the counter. Her accent had the soft roll of the South. Marlowe smiled faintly for the first time that morning. Right on time, Mrs. Freeman. Chloe blinked. You know her? He nodded. One of my first investors. She gave me the money to open my second restaurant when no one else would. Mrs. Freeman smiled warmly at Marco. And I still remember washing dishes in his first one. He paid me in pie. Marco grinned. That sounds like a good deal. Best I ever made, she said. Then her tone shifted. Cool, but not unkind. He told me what happened. Said he needed to see for himself if the heart had gone out of this place. Chloe tried to speak, but words caught in her throat. Mrs. Freeman stepped closer. You know, child, I used to run a diner just like this one. We had people come in from every walk of life. Lawyers, janitors, truckers, preachers. You never knew who you were feeding. So we fed everyone like they were family. That's what Marlowe's was supposed to mean. Her eyes, kind but sharp, held Chloe's. When did you forget that? Tears welled in Chloe's eyes, but she said nothing. By 10, the formal audit was over. Dana closed her tablet. Findings are clear. Staff needs full retraining. Management review recommended. Marlowe nodded slowly. Thank you, Dana. I'll handle the rest personally. She and the clipboard man left quietly, leaving the three of them alone, Marlowe, Chloe, and Marco, standing in the echo of their silence. Chloe finally broke. Why are you doing this to me? She whispered. You could have just fired me, but instead you're dragging this out, making me feel small. Marlowe turned toward her, his voice calm but heavy. I'm not trying to make you feel small. I'm trying to make you see small, the way you made others feel. So maybe you'll stop doing it. She blinked through tears. You think that'll change me? I don't think, he said. I hope. He glanced at Marco. Show her how to start the day properly, the way it should be done. Marco hesitated, unsure, then nodded. First, we light the coffee burners. Fresh batch, not yesterday's grounds. Chloe frowned, embarrassed but obedient. Okay. She followed him behind the counter. Then, he continued, we wiped the menus, even the corners. People noticed the corners. Marlowe watched, arms crossed. There was something almost peaceful about the moment. like he was watching the rebuilding of something he'd once loved. Then his phone buzzed again. He stepped aside, answering quietly. "Yes," he said. "Yes, I've seen the reports. I'll be there by noon." A pause. "No, I'm not pressing charges, but make sure the press knows I'm reopening Midtown under new management next week." Chloe froze mid-motion. New management? Marlowe hung up and looked at her. "That's right. Sir, please." He sighed. "You're not being replaced. You're being tested." Her brow furrowed. "Tested." He leaned closer, voice low. "Let's see if you can lead when no one knows your name. Tomorrow morning, you'll report to our East Side branch as a server. No title, no authority. If you can earn respect there, you'll have a future here." Her breath hitched. "And if I can't? Then you'll have learned what it feels like to start over, like I did." He turned away, adjusting his jacket. The sunlight through the window caught his profile, warm and resolute. There was power in his restraint, not vengeance, but purpose. And for the first time, Chloe understood. This wasn't just punishment. It was a mirror.
The East Side branch of Marlowe's kitchen was smaller, older, and smelled faintly of cinnamon and dish soap. The morning light came through the windows in fractured stripes, painting the floor in gold and dust. Chloe stood there in a plain apron with no name tag, stripped of her title, stripped of her pride. She'd arrived early, as ordered. The manager on duty, a soft-spoken woman named Elise, handed her a notepad and a polite smile. "We're short-staffed today. You'll be taking tables 4 through 6. Just remember, greet every guest within a minute of seating and refill waters before they ask." "Yes, ma'am," Chloe said automatically. Elise tilted her head. "Relax. You're not on trial here." But Chloe was, and she knew it. Every movement she made, how she carried a tray, how she smiled, how she listened, all of it felt watched, judged. The ghosts of her arrogance followed her like perfume. By mid-morning, the cafe filled up with construction workers, students, office clerks, ordinary people. Chloe moved among them quietly, murmuring, "Good morning," and "Can I get you anything else?" with a humility she'd never felt before. It was exhausting. When one man, weary, in a worn coat, asked for just toast and water, her body tensed, remembering the sting of her own voice from 2 days before. "You planning to order anything else?" Her own words replayed in her mind like a curse. She took a breath. "Of course, sir," she said gently. "Whole wheat or white?" "White's fine," he said. "And would you like a side of butter or jam?" "It's on me." He looked up at her, surprised, grateful. "That's kind, miss. Thank you." Chloe smiled, something real flickering through. "It's nothing." But it wasn't nothing. It was something fragile, something she hadn't known she could give without calculation. At 11, the door opened, and there he was again, David Marlowe. He entered quietly, without entourage or warning, the same denim jacket now paired with a clean white shirt. His eyes swept the room like a painter assessing light. The other staff straightened instinctively. Elise hurried over. "Mr. Marlowe, what an honor." He waved it off. "Just another customer today." He looked to Chloe. "Table 4 open?" She froze. "Yes, sir." "Then I'll sit there." She guided him to a booth by the window, hands trembling slightly. He noticed. Of course he did. When he sat, she placed a menu before him, careful not to meet his eyes too long. "Coffee?" she asked. "Please." She nodded and walked off, every step heavy with the weight of everything unsaid. When she returned with the coffee, he spoke before she could set it down. "You look different." "I feel different," she admitted. "Good," he said. "That's how growth works."
Uncomfortable, honest. She set the cup in front of him. "I didn't expect you to show up here. I didn't expect you to last this long." His tone was calm, not cruel, Most people quit before humility teaches them anything. I thought about it, she said. This morning, when I saw the uniform. No title, no power. I felt invisible. Now you know what it's like for most people who walk through those doors, he said quietly. Her eyes dropped to the table. I know. I was awful to you. He stirred his coffee slowly. Why? She hesitated. Because I wanted to feel important. Because I was scared of being small. Then you chose the wrong way to grow, he said. You can't rise by standing on someone else. She swallowed hard. I know that now. He looked out the window, watching the city move. Do you? She followed his gaze, people hurrying to work, a courier biking past, a child pressing his face to the glass of a bakery across the street. Life was happening, with or without her redemption. I do, she said softly. I really do. Their conversation was interrupted by a commotion at another table. An older woman had dropped her wallet. A man in his suit had stepped right over it. Without thinking, Chloe rushed over, scooped it up, and handed it back. Here you go, ma'am. The woman smiled. Thank you, dear. When Chloe turned back, Marlowe was watching her. You didn't even think, he said. You just acted. She shrugged, flushed. It was instinct. He smiled faintly. The right kind, this time. Elise came over to refill his water. Everything all right, Mr. Marlowe? He nodded. Better than all right. Tell me, how long have you worked with her? Chloe? Just today. She's been helping us out. She's learning fast, he said. Chloe's head jerked up. You think so? I know so. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small leather notebook, the same one he'd written in the day she mocked him. He opened it and tore out a page, sliding it across the table. She looked down. It was the same phrase he'd written under his signature. Hospitality starts where judgment ends. I wrote that years ago, he said, when this place was just a dream. I'd forgotten what it really meant, until you reminded me. She blinked, confused. I reminded you? He nodded. Sometimes you have to watch something break to remember why it mattered in the first place. Her throat tightened. So, what happens now? He stood, leaving cash under the saucer. What happens now depends on what you do next. As he turned to leave, she blurted, Wait, are you still going to close the Midtown branch? He paused at the door. No, he said. I'm reopening it tomorrow. With who? With you. Her breath caught. Me? As assistant manager, he said, under Marco. She stared. Wait, Marco? He smiled slightly. He's earned it. Her mind reeled. But you'll learn more from serving under someone you once dismissed than you ever would leading people who fear you. She opened her mouth, closed it again, tears prickling at the corners of her eyes. Why are you giving me another chance? He turned halfway toward her, the light from the window catching the quiet pride in his expression. Because someone once gave me one, and because the best redemption stories always start with failure. Then he was gone, leaving the bell over the door to whisper in his wake. For a long moment, Chloe stood frozen. Then she looked at the note again, its edges crumpled from his hand. Hospitality starts where judgment ends. She folded it carefully, slipped it into her apron pocket, and exhaled. Tomorrow she would walk back into Midtown, not as the woman who sneered at a stranger, but as someone willing to learn from him. Outside, sunlight broke through the clouds. For the first time in days, she didn't feel small. She just felt ready. The next morning dawned bright, as if the city itself wanted to start over. The rain had washed the air clean, leaving everything sharper, fresher. A faint hum of traffic pulsed through the streets outside Marlowe's kitchen Midtown, but inside there was stillness, a nervous kind of calm before a curtain rise. Chloe stood by the entrance, tying her apron with steady hands. Her reflection in the door's glass didn't look like the woman who'd sneered at a stranger a few days ago. That woman had worn arrogance like perfume. This one wore resolve. Her hair was pulled back. No lipstick, no armor, just honesty. Across the room, Marco adjusted the collar of his new black shirt, the crisp one that came with his promotion. The badge on his chest read Assistant Manager. He looked at it like it still wasn't real. "Morning," Chloe said softly. He turned, wary. "Morning." "You look good in that shirt," she said. He shrugged. "Still getting used to it." "Yeah," she said quietly. "Me too." He nodded toward her. "You nervous?" "Terrified," she admitted. "You?" "Always." They both laughed. Awkward, but real. The laughter died when the door opened. David Marlowe stepped in. Today, he wasn't in his denim jacket. He wore a charcoal suit, opened at the collar, with a confidence that didn't demand attention. It commanded it. The staff straightened instinctively. Even the espresso machine seemed to quiet in reverence. "Morning," he said. "Morning, sir," Marco and Chloe echoed together. He glanced around, his eyes sweeping the space like a sculptor inspecting his work. The room had been polished, menus wiped, silverware gleamed. Even the chalkboard had been redone. At the top, in careful handwriting, someone had written, "No minimum order. Everyone is welcome." He smiled faintly. "Good start." Then he turned to the two of them. "How's the mood today?" Marco answered first. "Hopeful." "Uneasy," Chloe added. "Good," Marlowe said. "That's the balance I like. Keeps everyone awake." He gestured for them to follow. "We'll open in 5, but before we do, I want to say something." They gathered near the counter as the morning sun slanted through the window, cutting golden lines across the floor. "When I built this company," Marlowe began, "I thought the hardest part would be survival, paying bills, keeping investors happy, expanding without losing heart. I was wrong. The hardest part is keeping soul alive in a business. It's too easy to forget why we started." He looked at Chloe. "You forgot, but so did I. Watching you reminded me of that." Her eyes flicked up, surprised. "Me?" He nodded. "You made me look in the mirror. You made me remember that we don't build places like this for profit. We build them for people." He turned to Marco. "And you reminded me that listening is a form of leadership. Congratulations on your promotion." Marco smiled shyly. "Thank you, sir. But I'm still learning." "We all are," Marlowe said. He paused, then gestured for the door. "Let's open up." By noon, the place was buzzing. The hum of conversation filled every corner. Laughter, clinking cups, the sizzle of the kitchen. Customers who had seen the viral video online came in out of curiosity, some ready to judge, others to support. Chloe approached each table with humility and grace. She smiled, not the tight, performative one, but the kind that made people feel seen. A woman at one booth said, "You're the waitress from that video, aren't you?" Chloe froze, then nodded. "Yes, I am." The woman studied her. "You were cruel." "I was," Chloe said simply. "And I'm sorry." The woman nodded slowly, her expression softening. "Well, this sandwich is wonderful." Chloe smiled. "Thank you, ma'am. That means a lot." When she walked away, she felt lighter. She wasn't hiding anymore. Across the room, Marlowe watched quietly from his booth. He didn't interfere, didn't direct. He just observed, the way he had that first day, when she'd mistaken silence for weakness. Now she understood what it really was, strength disguised as stillness. At one point, he rose and took over the coffee station himself. Customers gasped when they realized who he was. "You're him, aren't you?" one whispered. He grinned. "Just a man who loves good coffee."
By 2 o'clock, the lunch rush slowed. Marlowe gathered the staff again near the counter. "You did good today," he said simply. Elise, who'd come from the east side to help, smiled. "Feels like the heart's back." Marlowe nodded. "Let's keep it that way." He turned to Chloe and Marco. "You two close up together tonight. Then come to the office in the morning. I have one last decision to make." That night, after the final table was cleared and the last receipt printed, Chloe sat alone in the booth where it had all begun. The same corner, the same view, but everything felt different. The city outside was alive again. Laughter, footsteps, the pulse of possibility. She ran her fingers over the smooth wood of the table and whispered, "Thank you." Marco came over, hanging his apron. "Talking to yourself?" "Maybe," she said, with a small smile. He sat across from her. "You did good today." "So did you, boss." He laughed. "Don't call me that." "Why not? You earned it." He hesitated. "You know, when he first said I'd be your manager, I thought he was joking." "Yeah," she said softly. "I deserved that wake-up call." He nodded. "You handled it better than I would have." She looked down, thoughtful. "You know what's funny? I used to think authority meant people had to look up to you. Turns out it's about learning when to look up yourself." Marco smiled. "Guess you finally learned what hospitality really means." Chloe's gaze drifted to the chalkboard again. "Everyone is welcome." "Yeah," she said. "I think I did." The next morning, they met Marlowe at the corporate office. Glass walls, sunlight pouring in, the skyline spread behind him like a mural of second chances. He stood behind his desk, arms folded, smiling faintly. "Good morning," he said. "I've made my decision." Chloe braced herself. "You're both staying, together." She blinked. "Together?" "You'll co-manage Midtown," he said. "She knows structure, he knows heart. Maybe between you, we'll finally have both." Marco's jaw dropped. "Sir, I don't even—" "Don't overthink it," Marlowe interrupted. "Just lead like you serve." Chloe's voice wavered. "Thank you, sir. I won't waste this." He smiled, a hint of pride in his eyes. "You already didn't." Then, as they turned to leave, he called out softly, "Chloe." She looked back. He nodded toward the window where the city glimmered below. "Next time someone walks in and orders only fries, make sure they leave full." She smiled through tears. "Yes, sir." Marlowe watched them go, then turned to the window himself. Down below, people bustled between crosswalks and cabs, a mosaic of stories, unseen but worthy. He whispered, half to himself, half to the ghost of his grandmother's voice, "Hospitality starts where judgment ends." The city swallowed his words, carrying them forward like a prayer.